The record will reflect the presence of the members of the jury. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Taylor has returned to the witness stand. You may be seated. We did take up your questions out of the doctor's presence and of course out of your presence as well. And so we will now proceed with these questions. First of all, do you understand that you're still under oath?
Yes.
All right, very good. I am going to read some questions to you. After I read a question, I will tell you that you can answer the question, and then you can face the jurors and answer the question. After you're finished answering the question, if you would look back to me as you're doing right now, I'll take that as a signal that you're finished answering the question. I'll then go on to the next question. After the last question, I'll see if the attorneys have any follow-up questions for you. All right?
Yes.
If at any time you would like me to read a question again, please feel free to ask me that. I'll be happy to do that. And also, one of the questions will involve one of the exhibits, so I'm going to, or at least one. I'm going to ask counsel if you would please cue that up. It doesn't have to be displayed at this moment, but
Please, sir.
thank you so much. All right, the first question reads, were you advised or obtained any animal bodily fluids, parentheses, blood, saliva, close parentheses, on the evidence specimen? You may answer the question.
We did not, or my agency did not obtain any fluids, animal bodily fluids on those specimens that I received.
The next question reads, would a chipped tooth would still have jagged injuries if flesh or bone is chewed on? You may answer the question.
A chipped tooth would have some irregularities in the marking that it caused, even with the flesh that has been chewed on. As long as there's flesh that is protecting or covering the bone, that is going to affect the marking, but you would see irregularities in that marking due to the chipped tooth.
The next question reads, would a broken or injured tusk would cause bruising or unclean or jagged injuries versus clean-cut type of markings of injury? You may answer the question.
A damaged tusk or tooth, when it would impact the soft tissue or bone, would have a very distinct appearance compared to a tooth that was not affected. So a tooth that was completely intact would have a different signature, a different appearance than a tooth that was damaged.
The next question reads, can the markings on the jawbone be consistent with the blade of a hand saw? You may answer the question.
The markings that are appearing on the mandible are inconsistent with that seen in a saw. They're very different characteristics. That is why all the markings on there are noted as knife-incised wounds or knife-incised cut marks, as opposed to a saw.
The next question reads, did you notice any damage such as fractures or cut marks on the palate and interior nose bones? If yes, what? You may answer the question.
I did not observe any cut marks on the interior nose bones or the palate. I did note perimortem fractures, and that was because of the nature of those bones. That was the extent of my analysis on those bones.
All right, and for the next question, we'll need State's Exhibit 408 in evidence. All right, thank you very much. All right. And the question reads, in Exhibit 408, is the inside, parentheses, tongue side, close parentheses, or the outside, parentheses, cheek side, close parentheses, of the tooth depicted?
This image is actually depicting the cheek side, the outside of the mandible and tooth.
All right, and again, we'll use the exhibit for this next question. The question reads, please clarify, is the tooth in exhibit 408 on the right or left mandible? You may answer the question.
The tooth in this exhibit is on the left side of the mandible. Oh, I apologize. I misspoke it because I'm looking at the image. It is on the right-hand side of the mandible. It's on the same side as all of the other damage observed.
Let me just read that question one more time to make sure that you answered it, and you may have. It reads, please clarify, is the tooth on exhibit 408 on the right or left mandible?
Yeah, the tooth is on the right mandible.
All right, and the next question reads, could the cut marks have been made by a chainsaw? You may answer the question.
The cut marks observed cannot have been caused or could not have been caused by a chainsaw.
Right, the next question reads, while viewing the cut marks on the lower right jaw, you said it was made by a sawing motion. Could the cut marks also reflect a direct impact force of, say, a knife? You may answer the question.
The cut marks that are being referred to with a slicing or sawing motion, those did not or do not present as if they were a direct impact. So as in a stab wound situation where there's a direct impact to the bone, there's actually chipping along the surface that is characteristic of a sawing motion where a blade is going back and forth. And that is why I specifically said that it was as if the blade was being used in a sawing fashion.
All right, and I'll now see if there are any attorney follow-up questions. Mr. Rivera.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Your Honor, will the court read the first question? Because I do have a clarification with respect to the first question asked.
The first question that I read to the witness?
Yes, Your Honor, please.
You want me to read that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Oh, okay, sure. It reads, were you advised or obtained any animal bodily fluids, parentheses, blood, saliva, close parentheses, on the evidence specimen?
Now, Dr. Taylor, with respect to that question, you answered that your agency, and this would be the DPAA, did not provide any information with respect to that question, correct?
That is correct.
My question to you though is this: did you receive any advisement or information from the Maui Police Department when they sent you the specimens to take a look at whether or not there was any animal fluids or activity that was gathered in that area?
Objection calls for hearsay.
Yeah, this goes to information.
The objection is overruled as it may relate to a basis for may not relate to a basis for the witness's opinion. You may answer the question.
I did not receive any information from the Maui Police Department.
To that effect.
Yes.
They did provide information as to the circumstances of the evidence, is that correct?
Objection calls for hearsay.
You know, you can same response, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled.
They provided information on the recovery scenario, and that was the extent of the information I received.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a couple more than I'm done. With respect to State's Exhibit 408, do you have permission to publish that again?
Yes, permission granted.
Thank you. The chipped tooth and the marks that you see on the jawbone, and I'm going to show State's Exhibit 408A, which you marked in arrows, and permission to publish that, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you. 408, the markings that's shown with the black arrows and the blue arrows, did they correspond with the tooth markings or with the cut markings that is depicted below on the jawbone?
The blue markings correspond, they're in line with two linear cuts on the mandible body just below. The black markings do not, as they are fractures, not cut marks.
Okay, and you have permission to publish 413A.
Permission granted.
Thank you. I'm showing you Stacy Exhibit 413A. Or let me get a larger picture. 411A.
You may publish that.
And you're on 410A. I'm sorry, I got the right one now. Looking at Stacy Exhibit 410A, are those markings the red arrows, which are the 6th, 7th, and 8th arrows? Do they mark up with the first two yellow arrows at the top?
The 7th and 8th red arrow, if I'm,
The 7th and 8th will match up with the
Yes.
two yellow arrows.
that is correct.
And are those two yellow arrows, is that the one depicted outside of the tooth in States Exhibit 408?
Yes.
And then last question was, you were asked if you noticed any damage or cuts to the palate and the interior nose bone, I believe the vomer, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, you said you did notice some fractures
Yes.
to that area. Are you able to tell us what could have caused those fractures, whether it was blunt force or something else?
I cannot. Those bones are very thin bones, and unfortunately are common bones to fracture for a number of reasons. So all I can ascertain is that they occurred during the perimortem interval.
Perimortem means at the time of death?
At or around, yes.
At around the time of death. Could those bones, the palate as well as the vomer or the interior nose bone, could they fracture or fall off based on decomposed state of the body?
The appearance of the bones that are observed, those would not have fallen off in that type of fragment just due to decomposition. They were fractured in some kind and then could have fallen out after decomposition.
And when you say some kind, is that based on some kind of trauma?
Possibly, yes.
But not just falling off by itself?
No.
And one more question. With respect to a broken tusk or a chipped tooth, you said that would leave a different type of impression than a tusk that is not broken or a tooth that is not chipped. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The injuries or the wounds that you observed on the right jawbone, which contained approximately 22, you mentioned, are any of those consistent, or would you consider any of those consistent with a chipped tooth from an animal or a broken tusk from a wild boar?
No.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mr. Hardy?
Thank you. With respect to that first question, well, let me withdraw that. The examination you did, was that limited to visual, including the use of a microscope?
Yes,
Okay, so you weren't testing for fluids, correct?
that is correct.
And with respect to the chipping of the long bone, did you observe a little bit more roundness than would ordinarily be expected on a straight chip?
I did not know.
Were were you given the pictures of the bone at time of recovery?
No, I was not.
Okay, were you made aware that doctor, before you obtained the items you obtained, Dr. Harles had already done a light cleaning?
I was not aware of that, no.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. You are excused. And ladies and gentlemen, before our next witness, we need to do a brief hearing on your presence. So we'll have that witness brought into the court. We'll have you go to the jury room. This should be relatively short. Mr. Rivera, you may go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Instead, we're calling Dr. Emily Goff. Tracy had that list of spelling. She had it.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated, and you may proceed with your examination of the witness for purposes of this 104 hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Goff. Could you please state your full name, please?
Yes, Madison Lee Goff.
And what is your current occupation?
I'm currently retired.
Prior to retiring, what was your occupation?
Yeah, I was actually the director and chair of the Forensic Sciences Department at Chaminade University of Honolulu. And prior to that, I was professor of entomology at University of Hawaii at Manoa.
And starting with the first position you mentioned, how long did you hold that position?
I was at Chaminade for about 13 years.
And at the UH Manoa, how long were you working there?
I was at UH Manoa for, according to my calculations, about 22 years, but according to the state retirement system, 23 years.
Oh, you have an extra year than that. Can you, just for the record, what is forensic entomology?
Okay, well, actually, entomology is basically the study of insects. And forensic entomology is any time insects become part of a legal proceeding. We recognize three subspecialties in this. We have what we call stored product forensic entomology. And this one, everybody's encountered it. You buy a box of cereal, and as you put the cereal out in the morning, as you're reaching for the milk, the cereal begins to walk away because insects have gotten in and damaged the product. Okay, you want your money back. The second would be what we call structural forensic entomology. And this is a favorite here in Hawaii, as we have quite a termite problem. And this basically is when proper precautions are not taken and the termites get into a building and begin to consume it. In both of these cases, the entomologist is called in relatively late, and the purpose is to assess damages, who has to pay. Now, the third area is what we call medical legal or medical criminal forensic entomology, and this is the one that people most frequently associate with the term forensic entomology. And here you've got a crime that has been committed, most frequently a homicide. And the entomologist is then called in, typically fairly early in the investigation, and he's asked to provide an estimate of the time of death, determine if the body has been moved following death. We have an area now known as entomotoxicology, which is detection of drugs in the body and the effects of the drugs on the development of insects feeding on the body. We use insects as alternate sources of DNA in some cases. So these are basically the areas that you would work with.
Thank you. And can you briefly but fully provide us with your educational background?
Yes, I received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Hawaii at Manoa in 1966. I received a Master's of Science from California State University at Long Beach. That was in 1973. Following that, I returned to the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I received my doctorate in entomology in 1977.
Is there a board certification in your field?
Yes, there is.
And are you involved in that?
I was actually involved in the formation of the American Board of Forensic Entomology, and for the first 6 years of its existence, I was the chair of the board. On my retirement, I did withdraw from that particular process.
At the present, though, are you a qualified forensic entomologist?
Yes, I've been qualified in several different jurisdictions.
Does that include Hawaii?
Yes.
And have you been qualified as an expert in forensic entomology in jurisdictions throughout the United States?
Yes.
And as you said, do you recall how many jurisdictions, more or less, that you've been qualified?
I don't remember how many precisely, but probably about 7 or 8, including testimony in federal courts.
And have you engaged in publications and articles in journals accepted in your profession with respect to your field in forensic entomology?
Yes, my total publication list is 225 publications that have appeared. Of these, 60 some odd are in specifically the field of forensic entomology.
And, at this time, I've already shown counsel, for purposes of this hearing, one of the Marcus State's Exhibits 419, which is a curriculum vitae of Dr. Goff, and State's Exhibit 420, again marked for identification, which involves a listing of testimony he's provided as an expert witness in the various jurisdictions mentioned. At this time, the state would offer to evidence both exhibits 419 and 420 marked for identification.
No objection for purposes of this hearing.
All right, states exhibits 419 and 420 marked for identification purposes are received in evidence for purposes of this hearing.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Goff, have you ever been qualified to testify in the courts here in the Second Circuit, the county bar?
I don't believe on Maui.
At this time, the state would offer Dr. Goff.
Mr. Norton.
Good morning, Dr. Goff.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, when did you say you retired?
I retired in 2013.
2013. Have you kept abreast of any recent publications in the field of forensic entomology having to do with the specific subject you're going to be testifying today, is essentially determining time of death?
I act as a reviewer for the Journal of Forensic Sciences for papers specifically dealing in this area.
Okay. And with respect to your estimations that you've made in this case, were those based on weather data provided to you from the Maui Police Department?
Yes,
And that weather data was out of the Kahului station?
that's correct.
Okay. And to make your determinations, is it fair to say that you need to rely on the accuracy of those documents?
One thing I would point out is what I make is not a determination, but rather an estimate. And the better the data, then the more accurate the estimate.
Fair enough. Another question. When you're when you're making a determination for accumulated degree hours, do you use an average temperature for the day, or do you look at the temperature of every hour?
As much as possible, I'll use each hour.
Is that what you did in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
And Mr. Rivera, you indicated you were offering a witness, but I think it was...
Sorry, yeah, the state is offering Dr. Goff as an expert in forensic entomology and qualified to testify in that area.
Mr. Nura.
No objection.
The court, based on the position of the parties as well as the evidence presented, is satisfied that by reason of skill, knowledge, education, training, and experience, the witness has been duly qualified to testify as an expert in the field of forensic entomology, and will have the jury return to the courtroom. And again, counsel, because the jury hasn't had the benefit of the 104 hearing, and because the jury makes its own determination relative to the opinions of experts, please feel free to ask questions, be it indirect or in cross concerning qualifications.
Thank you.
The record will reflect the presence of the members of the jury. Doctor, you may be seated. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, the witness has been placed under oath and remains under oath. You understand that, Doctor?
Yes.
Thank you very much. You may call the witness and proceed with your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the state will be calling Dr. M. Lee Goff.
And you may proceed with your examination of the witness having already been placed under oath.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Goff, could you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, my name is Madison Lee Goff.
And are you retired, Doctor?
Yes, I am.
What was your occupation?
Okay, prior to retirement, I was employed at Chaminade University of Honolulu. I was director and chair of the Forensic Sciences program. At that point, we had both a bachelor's and a master's degree in forensic sciences. Prior to that, I was at University of Hawaii at Manoa in the Department of Entomology.
And let's get back to the first one. How long were you the director of the Forensic Sciences program at Shamla?
I was director there for 13 years.
And how long were you a professor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa campus?
I would say 22 years, although the state retirement system seems to think I was there for 23 years.
And that's to your benefit, right?
Yes. I'm not going to argue.
Now, you use the word entomology. Can you tell us what is entomology?
Yes, entomology, strictly speaking, is the study of insects. And these are animals that have three body regions: head, thorax, and abdomen. They're going to have 3 pairs of legs, and typically for most of them they'll have 1 or 2 pairs of wings. Now, in practice, we include other groups of organisms in this particular discipline. We have the centipedes, we have the scorpions, we have ticks, mites. These are not strictly insects, but they tend to be lumped in with the insects the entomologist gets to work with.
Okay. And are you familiar with the term forensic entomology?
Yes, I am.
Then can you explain to us what is forensic entomology?
Okay, we have 3 kind of recognized subspecialties in forensic entomology. Forensic entomology itself, in the broadest sense, is any time insect evidence becomes involved in legal proceedings. Now, within that, we recognize the stored product forensic entomology, where products are damaged. Cereal that you might want to eat in the morning, you open the box and you have beetles crawling around. You generally don't like that. If you're an entomologist, you do. We have structural forensic entomology. That's where termites will get in and damage a building, damage a structure. And we also have what people tend to think of as forensic entomology, and this is where a crime has actually been committed. And the entomologist is brought in to assist law enforcement in resolution of the question and analysis of evidence that has been presented.
And Dr. Say, is there a board certification with respect to forensic entomology?
Yes, there is. The American Board of Forensic Entomology provides a certification in this. I was actually one of the founding members of the board and served as chair of the board for approximately 6 years following its establishment. When I retired in 2013, I more or less dropped out of the board, let the younger people have more say in terms of what was going on.
Okay. While you were a forensic entomologist, so were you board certified at that time?
Yes, I was.
In addition to being the director of the Chaminade University's Forensic Sciences Division, as well as a professor at the UH Manoa campus, did you have any other, I guess, instructor or professor type duties in other universities or with other schools?
I have done considerable lecturing on both the national and international level. I spent as a visiting professor at the University in Campinas in Brazil. I've taught courses in France and several courses in Italy, Costa Rica, Brazil, other places throughout the world. For a while, I was one of the instructors for the Detection and Recovery of Human Remains courses that's taught at the FBI Academy in Quantico. And when that course actually ended, primarily as a result of 9/11 and the activities at the World Trade Center, we established another course which was basically a terrorism response course, and I was part of the instructional staff on that for 2 years as a result of my involvement in the processing of the World Trade Center.
Thank you, Dr. Goff. Have you also engaged in publications such as articles and research that you have done in the field of forensic entomology?
Yes, I have.
And can you describe that for us, please?
Well, present time I've published around 225 papers in scientific journals and a couple of texts that I have assisted in the editing. Of these, 60 some odd are specifically dealing with forensic entomology.
And as you work as a forensic entomologist, have you consulted with, I guess, any media presentations? I'll just leave it at that.
And so I've been involved in these. In 2000, I wrote a book that was published. It's called A Fly for the Prosecution. And as a result of this, I became involved in the TV series CSI, original Las Vegas. And I was there as a consultant.
And how long did you work with the CSI program as a consultant?
We were on for 16 seasons. I was not there constantly.
Oh, you were there in Las Vegas constantly?
No.
Now, you said you did publish a book, Fly for the Prosecution, is that correct? And out of the United States.
Yes, I have.
And can you list some of the jurisdictions where you have been qualified to testify as such?
Okay. Here in Hawaii, I have testified in California, the state of Washington, Texas, and into New Mexico on one occasion. Provided testimony for a case in Canada, and also some cases in Australia, and involved with some work in New Zealand, and really have to check for my listing for the rest of it.
And when you say here in Hawaii, is this the first time you're testifying on Maui?
Yes, it is.
And as well, testifying as an expert, have you testified for the defense as well as the prosecution?
It's about 25% of my testimony has actually been for the defense.
Now, turning your attention to the matter at hand right now, do you recall receiving a request for assistance from the Maui Police Department through one of its employees, Anthony Earls?
Yes.
And approximately when did this take place?
This would have been the 23rd of May 2014.
And as a result of that request, well, first of all, did you agree to assist the Maui Police Department and consider that request?
Yes, I did.
And turning your attention to the date, May 27, 2014, what, if anything, did you receive from the Maui Police Department pursuant to their request for assistance?
Yeah, I received a package containing 9 lots of insect specimens.
And before we get into that, as a forensic entomologist in this area and pursuant to the request for assistance by the Maui Police Department, did that work entail, I guess, did it involve the entomology of the life cycle of a fly?
Yes, it did.
Would it assist you in explaining the life cycle of a fly in your assistance with the Maui Police Department?
Yes, I think it.
And prior to coming to court today, did you prepare something to assist you with that?
Yes.
And what is that?
Okay, it's a series of images that I put together dealing with the life cycle of a fly.
And you're the assuring counsel, what has been marked as State Exhibit 421, and a copy of this presentation has been provided to the defense prior to this. I can do one thing first, I do have a spelling list for the court reporter for some of the terms that Dr. Goff will be using. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. And may I approach Dr. Goff, Your Honor?
You may do so.
Okay, Dr. Goff, I'm going to show you what has been marked for identification as State's Exhibit 421. If you could please take a look at that.
Yeah.
And what is State's Exhibit 421 that you've just taken a look at?
Okay, basically, these are the images that I have illustrating the life cycle of a fly.
And is that something you yourself prepared?
Yes,
And does it accurately reflect the images that you prepared?
yes it does.
Your Honor, at this time the State would move into evidence State's Exhibit 421 marked for identification.
Mr. Bernardi.
Can I just have a brief idea?
Yes.
When were those prepared?
These are actually slides that I have in various, say, presentations. Probably they were prepared about 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay, so they're not specific to this case.
They're not specific to this case, they're simply illustrative of the life cycle of the fly.
For that limited purpose, Your Honor, I have no objection.
State's Exhibit 421, so marked for identification purposes, is received in evidence. You may continue with your examination of the
Thank
evidence,
you.
Mr. Rivera.
And Dr. Goff, in order to, I'm going to go through your slideshow presentation. Do you need to approach the monitor, or can you do it from where you're seated?
Probably be better if I could walk over to it.
Okay, and there's 2 monitors in your gunner. May Dr. Goff approach?
Yes, Doctor, you may step down. I believe there's a pointer right around that corner, and then you can use this monitor here. The only thing I would ask you to do is to stay back to make sure that the jurors have a good line of sight. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
And permission to publish.
Permission granted.
Okay, Dr. Goff, just let me know when you want the next slide.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, the monitor's right there.
Okay. I was cheerfully looking at this one.
If you could just step to the side, because
Yeah.
we have some people in the corner. that
Right.
might not be able to-
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Say this is basically something to demonstrate the life cycle of a fly. And flies belong to this order Diptera, and it's a fairly substantial order of insects. It is characteristically, Diptera only will have one pair of functional wings, as opposed to many of the insects which will have 2 pairs of functional wings. Okay. So we have the next slide. Okay. Now, one of the things that makes an insect very useful in estimating time periods, things like this, is that they go through a predictable life cycle. And this life cycle consists of a series of distinct morphological stages. Okay, basically, you can tell one stage from the next. Now, in this particular instance, each of these is going to progress at a given rate, dependent upon the time, or temperature. It's one of the main things that influences rate of development. Okay. And what happens is the female fly comes in and she lays an egg. Okay. Actually, she's going to lay a cluster of eggs. Typically, there are 4 ovipositions for a female fly. The first oviposition will consist of about 200 eggs, the next 2 of about 400 eggs, and the last one another 200 eggs. The bottom line here is it does not take a tremendous number of female flies to get a fairly large population of the larvae, or as we refer to them, maggots. Okay. This egg is going to hatch, and we will have our 3 larval stages. Okay. we refer to these as instars. All they have to do for the first and the second instar is eat and grow. And they basically are going to eat as rapidly as they can. When they actually reach maximum size, they have an external skeleton, and so consequently, there's a limit as to how big they can get. For the first two instars, they will eat and grow, and then they will molt into the next instar. When we reach the third instar, initially it eats and grows as quickly as possible, but then it reaches maximum size. Everything is under hormonal control. So, okay, rather than molt into another instar, they are going to leave the food resource. They are going to migrate away from it. And
You know, we just lost connection. I'm sorry, Dr. Goff.
Yeah. no, they're going to migrate away from the food resource and basically digest the food, sort themselves, and then they're going to enter into the pupal stage, or puparial stage. Okay? In this stage, everything that used to be the maggot breaks down, and you essentially have a second embryology that takes place, and out of that, we are then going to have the adult fly emerging. Okay? And the cycle starts again.
Okay, we lost connection. We're gonna have to. Okay, sorry about that.
So this just illustrates what goes on. Okay, so optimistically, I'd like to show you what each of these stages looks like. And because as you're doing this, you have to be able to recognize which of the stages is present so you'll know where in the developmental cycle everybody is.
Okay, hope this works.
Okay, so if we can go to the next slide. Okay, this is a typical cluster of blowfly eggs. Okay, and these are the flies that we encounter most frequently. These are in the family Calliphoridae, kind of large, heavy-bodied blue-green flies. You see them all over the place. Okay, so they're going to lay these eggs. Next slide. The eggs will hatch. And we're going to have three larval stages. And this is the first instar, the second instar, and the third instar. Okay. Now, when we get them, we have to know which instar they're in, and we have to know how long they are in order to tell where they are in the developmental cycle. So, to tell which instar they're in, beyond any reasonable doubt, next slide, we take a look at the posterior end of the maggot. And you have two little structures here. Okay, these are the posterior spiracles, or the primary breathing organs for a maggot, okay, which is perfectly logical because the head is down in typically decomposing material. It's wet, respiration would be difficult through that particular end. So, through evolution, they have moved to the back of the animal, and you have these two very nice structures. when you take a look at the first instar, next slide. Yeah, we have really very small structures. Okay, you can't really see it. There's not an awful lot there to look at. They are simply openings, although you do have some sclerotization there, hardening of tissue around the outside to keep them open so you can have exchange of air. Next slide. The second instar, we have two slits on either side. And again, sclerotization, it's rigid, stays open, you have exchange of gases. And the next one. Get to the third instar, we have three slits on either side. Now, as you move from one species to another, these slits may change in form. They may look quite different. And very frequently, you can make some species level identifications based on the form of these slits. But the numbers are going to stay constant. The second instar, you'll have 2. The third instar, you'll have 3. Okay, next slide. And then we have the puparium. Okay, this is the tanned, hardened, external skin of the third instar. It looks very much like a small football. Okay. And in this, you're going to have a second embryology that takes place. And then out of this, the next one, you'll have the adult fly emerge. Okay. And this is a head-on view of a male, in this particular case of the species Chrysomya megacephala. Okay. And you take a look, we have compound eyes, we have a pair of antennae here, we have 3 light-sensing structures up on the top, referred to as ocelli. The mouth you don't see. Instead, you have mouth parts that are dangled down below the body, and the mouth is actually internally somewhere around in here. So this basically is the life cycle of the fly. In order to make our determinations, we have to know the species, we have to know where in the stage of development things are, and what we're going to do is we're going to take the most mature specimens, and then we're going to work backwards to determine when the eggs were laid. And that is going to reflect, most probably, our minimum period of development.
Thank you. Please have a seat. Now, Dr. Goff, you testified earlier that you did, on May 27th of 2014, you did receive a FedEx package from the Maui Police Department containing 9 containers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what is the evidence. This is exhibits 400, 401, and 402. You know, may I quote you that evidence?
You may do so.
Thank you. I'm showing you State's Exhibit 400 to 401 and a box of exhibits containing or marked as Exhibit 402 with 7 containers. And if you can take a look at those, I'm going to ask if you recognize them.
Yes.
Okay. Are those the 9 containers that you received from the Maui Police Department through the FedEx packaging?
Yes, they appear to be.
And when you received those containers, Dr. Goff, were they sealed and unopened at that time?
Yes, they were.
And what type of condition were they in when you received them?
They were in good condition, although they had initially been preserved apparently in 10% formalin, which is not the best thing to preserve insects in. However, Anthony Earls noted on his voucher that in fact they had been transferred, as I suggested, from the 10% formalin into isopropyl alcohol, essentially a 35% mixture of isopropyl alcohol.
Okay, and so that was done according to the packaging?
Yes.
And that was according to your instructions?
Yes.
Now, once you received those specimens in the container, did you inventory what you had received?
Yes, I did.
And is that reflected in your report?
Yes.
Now, can you, do you have your report up there with you?
Yes, I do.
And you know, if it's, I'll check with Council Mike for you first. You know, permission for Dr. Goff to refer to his reports as we go through the containers.
Any objection? All right, you may do so.
Yeah, I just have a quick one here.
Sure.
When was the last time you looked at any of the specimens in this case?
I had to check to be sure the date I returned them, but my recollection was it was 2014.
So prior to coming here today, other than what you did then, you didn't look at
No, I
them?
didn't.
Okay. I've got no objection.
Proceed.
Thank you. And Dr. Goff, can you tell us what did you inventory pursuant to your report?
Right. I'll get the board up and getting a little crowded. Okay. Looking back at my report, I have the 9 containers enumerated as to what the labeling reflected in there. And then I went through and did identifications of specimens in each of the containers.
Now, were some of the containers specifically labeled so that you would be able to keep track of where those specimens or insects were recovered?
Yes, they were.
And can you go through the items that you returned?
Okay, the first indicates that it was collected from clothing. This I had as item 1, and it's collected on 13th of February 2014. The container number 2, again, containing insect specimens, samples collected from clothing. Okay, again, 13th February 2014. Container 3, labeled as BLK jeans. It was collected on the 13th of February 2014, placed into refrigeration at 2,400 hours. Number 4, specimen container labeled as green blanket, collected 13 February 2014, into refrigeration 2,400. Number 5, specimen container labeled as black skirt, collected 13 February, into refrigeration 2,400. Number 6 is specimen container labeled as sweater gray, collected 13 February 2014, again into refrigeration 2,400 hours. Number 7, specimen container labeled as nail D, collected 15 February 2014, into refrigeration 2,400 hours. Specimen or container 8 is labeled as number 1-7 bra, collected 14 February 2014. Number 9, specimen container labeled as soil indentation, collected 14 February, into refrigeration 2,400.
Okay. I want to take a look. Can I make approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
exhibit right here.
They're all receiving numbers.
Just gotta make sure people are receiving evidence.
That's receiving evidence. Now, you mentioned earlier that you made an identification of each of the specimens or insects in each container, is that correct?
That's correct.
And how did you go about doing that?
Okay. Basically using a stereo microscope and keys and already determined specimens from the collection, I went through and made the identifications.
So would that include, you were able to recognize the appearance of each of these specimens,
Yes,
as well as measure the length
yes.
of them? Okay. And turning your attention to, well, this might be quicker. Can you tell us the specimens you were able to identify?
Okay. We had actually 3 species of insects that were present in all of the collections. Okay, 2 of them were flies in the family Californidae. These are your blowflies. And these were Chrysomya megacephala and Chrysomya rufophaces. Okay, both of these are very common blowflies in Hawaii, and very widely distributed through the islands, and they are relatively aggressive, typically showing up very early in decomposition. The 3rd species, which was present only in collection 3, which is from the genes, was a staphylinid beetle, and this is in the genus Phalanthus. Now, this is not a fly, it's a beetle, but it is very commonly associated with decomposing material. However, it is a predator, and it is interested in the decomposition process only from the standpoint of having available prey present in terms of maggots. So it's there to feed on the maggots. It's typically a fairly early invader of remains, but it's not something that is really predictable in terms of it's not going to arrive at a specific time.
And in your report, did you list the 3 species as well as state from which specimen container you were able to identify them in?
Yes, I did.
And what calculations, if any, did you make with respect to, I guess, dating or determining when these species would have, and the term you used with us in your life cycle of fly presentation was oviposition, is that correct?
Yes.
So, Doctor, were you able to determine, I guess, the approximate time or estimate the approximate time of oviposition with respect to the 3 species of flies that you just mentioned?
Yes, actually 2 species of
I'm sorry, 2
flies, one species of beetle.
One clarification regarding whether or not he's just referring to the items in 401.
Mr. Reed.
You know, it says referring to all of the items in total with respect to the identifications.
Including 402.
Were you able to identify each of the species or each of the flies within all 9 containers?
I was able to identify the maggots present in each of the containers.
Okay, so then, you know, with whatever you identified in all 9 containers.
I believe that clarifies it. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there a process by which you're able to do this, Dr. Goff?
Okay, I ask for a little clarification on that. Are you talking about the estimate of the time to oviposition?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. What we're going to get into here is going to be a little bit of a discussion of a process called accumulated degree hours. Now, I believe I had a presentation that I had sent over to explain that.
That's correct. And Your Honor, I'm showing counsel what has been marked for identification as State Exhibit 422, of which the defense doesn't have a copy of. It has all of them. It's 400, 401, and 402. That's 7. You know, may I push Dr. Goff to State Exhibit 422, marked for identification.
You may do so.
Thank you. Dr. Goff, I want you to please take a look at State Exhibit 422, marked for identification.
Yes.
Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is it?
This basically is an explanation of the process of calculating accumulated degree hours.
Is that sort of like a math course now we got to look at?
Very brief.
Refund, okay, good. Does it accurately reflect the presentation you, I guess, you created in explaining what is the ADH?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time the state will move into this State's Exhibit, what number is it?
422.
State's Exhibit 422, marked for identification.
Mr. Nardi.
For the limited purpose of explaining the accumulated degree hours, I have no objection.
All right. All right. At this time, the court will receive in evidence State's Exhibit 422, marked for identification purposes. You may proceed.
Thank you. And your permission to publish and also
Permission
Dr.
granted.
Goff step down.
And you may step down.
Thank you. Okay. Insects, to a large extent, are going to be dependent on ambient temperature for the rate at which they develop. Now, when we find something out in the field, and we want to figure out basically how long it took to reach that stage of development, we go first to laboratory rearing data. Okay? And these are going to be studies that we've done at controlled temperatures. And basically, we know how long it takes for the first instar, the second instar, the third instar. Okay? But when you find a body, it's very rare that you are going to find the body in a laboratory with controlled conditions. So somehow we've got to find a way to extrapolate laboratory data out into what happened in the field. Well, for this, we go to a technique that actually was initially developed by agriculture. Now, they wanted to be able to predict pest outbreaks. And pests are insects. And so basically, they were also dependent upon temperature for their development. So the agricultural workers took this and developed this idea of accumulated degree hours to predict pest outbreaks so they would know when to treat the crops. So we've taken it and moved it into the forensic arena, and it works quite nicely. So our assumption here is that if there's an adequate food resource, okay, the rate of development for the insect is primarily regulated by the ambient temperature.
And Dr. Goff, I'm sorry, when you say the ambient temperature, are you talking about the temperature that's on the outside?
Yeah, just your normal, like your room temperature here. I don't know what the ambient temperature would be in here, but that would just be your normal temperature. Outside ambient temperature would be around, in the 80s, something like this. So, this is going to be the primary regulator of the rate of development. Okay. Next. So, this accumulated degree hours, okay, It's basically technique converts temperature and time into thermal units. And these can be used then to correlate laboratory rearing data with climatic data from a scene to estimate a period of insect development. So it's actually a very simple process, although people manage to make it quite complicated. The accumulated degree hours is equal to the temperature in degrees Celsius multiplied by the time in hours. So for an example, if the temperature is not minus 28, but it is 28 degrees Celsius and the time is 10 hours, accumulated degree hours is 28 degrees Celsius times 10 hours, and we have 280 accumulated degree hours. Okay, so it's a relatively simple process. And we simply continue to add these up as time goes on. And we start with when the body is found, when the insects are collected and the development ceases. And then we work backwards until we have acquired, in this case, if we've started and we're working backwards, we would keep going backwards till we hit 280 accumulated degree hours. That would be our estimate of the minimum period of time required for development.
And when you say the time required for development, do you mean when the oviposition or when the fly begins to lay its egg?
You have your oviposition, and the development is actually developing to this 280 degree stage.
Okay. You know, may approach and remove some of the specimens.
Yes.
It's a little crowded up there.
Yeah, thank you.
Take this in the box.
Now, Dr. Goff, were you able to apply the accumulated degree hours, or the ADH formula or equation into, I guess, the requests or the specimens that you were able to identify that you received from the Maui Police Department?
Yes, I was.
And did you record your results on that?
Yes, in my report.
And at this time, would it be, are you able to tell us what your results were with respect to that?
Yes.
Okay, can you go through that, please?
Okay. Taking the weather data that were provided to me by the Maui Police Department and applying.
To the extent that weather data is being relied on for the truth of the matter asserted and has not been presented to this court as evidence, I would object.
You know, I can make
Yes.
foundation on that.
Proceed.
Now, Dr. Goff, in order to apply the accumulated data hours in trying to determine or extrapolate back of when, I guess, oviposition or when the fly would begin to lay its eggs and when the process would start, you mentioned earlier that you do rely on the temperature or weather data, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in your field, how do you go about trying to determine the data or the temperature during certain time periods?
Okay, we determine the temperatures by going to the closest certified weather station that is available and getting either hourly temperature data, which we prefer, or daily mean temperatures. Okay. And then we use these to calculate the accumulated degree hours that are present at the crime scene. And while this may not be precisely the situation at the crime scene, this gives us a good approximation of what the temperature regimen was at that particular area at that point in time.
And in this instance, with respect to the temperatures in Hawaii, more specifically Maui, is the weather that, did the weather data that you received, you mentioned a corresponded with the Kahului Airport, is that correct?
That's correct.
If Kahului Airport is not exactly the same degree of temperature as, let's say, for example, in the Kenai area, would that have much effect, if any, with respect to your analysis?
Okay, working in Hawaii, I have a definite advantage over many individuals and when I have to work on the mainland. Our temperatures are relatively stable. And while there may be some minor variation as you move from one area to another, in this case, if we are looking at lowland types of areas, there's going to be some uniformity in the temperature. While it may not be exactly the same, or it is going to be still close enough that we can use it to provide an estimate. If I go up the side of Haleakala, then we have another problem, because those temperature data would not relate well to the temperature data from the scene or from Kahului Airport.
And in this case, what temperature data did you rely on for your analysis?
This was National Weather Service data provided by the Maui Police Department.
Your Honor, and I would object to you to strike that to the extent it's being provided to him not from the Weather Service but Maui Police Department. I think that essentially then relies on hearsay and explanation.
If this serves as part of the basis of the opinion to be rendered, and only, the witness can tell us that, but if that is the case, then I'll overrule the objection as that may be presented as a basis of an opinion. On the other hand, so for some other reason, then I'll need to consider that.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Goff, can you state again what information which weather data did you receive?
Okay, this weather data from the Kahului Airport, and this is from a National Weather Service station that is maintained at the Kahului Airport.
And it was provided to you by the Maui Police Department?
By the Maui Police Department.
And did you rely on that data to form your opinions when you did an analysis on the specimens that you received from the Maui Police Department?
Yes, I did.
And is that something that an expert in your field would routinely rely on?
We would routinely rely on National Weather Service data, recognizing that, again, you have the distance, and it is not going to be exactly the same, but it is what we're producing as an estimate.
Thank you. And you're with that.
In light of that, the objection is overruled.
Thank you. And now, Dr. Goff, can you tell us what did you do through your analysis?
Okay, well, basically, I converted the temperature data from the National Weather Service station into accumulated degree hours. Okay. Then I took a look at the specimens, and based on stage of development and total body length, I estimated where they were in their developmental cycle. And I was getting this, again, data from controlled laboratory studies. And in these particular collections, I had Chrysomya megacephala larvae, and these were the second and also third instar larvae. The largest of the larvae were third instar, and they were 10 to 12 millimeters in total length, with a mean of 11 millimeters. Okay. So the largest, the most developed, is going to then indicate the minimum period of time that they had been developing. Okay. We also had, as I said, second instar larvae. We had, let's see, here's my megacephalon. Now, we also had Chrysomya rufifascis. And Chrysomya rufifascis is one that typically comes in very quickly after Chrysomya megacephala. And here we had predominantly second instar larvae, which indicated they had not been developing as long as the Chrysomya rufifascis. Taking a look at the rearing data, able to determine that basically to reach that stage of development, it's going to require, for Chrysomya megacephala, 1,950 accumulated degree hours. Okay, so working backwards from the time that the collections were made and the specimens were fixed, determined that it's going to require, basically indicate between around 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the 10th of February would have been oviposition. Now, the smaller third instar Chrysomya megacephala would have required 1,716 accumulated degree hours to reach that stage of development. Okay, this would indicate that these began development somewhere around 7 o'clock in the evening on the 10th of February. Now, looking at the relative sizes of the maggots, it appeared that we had probably had 2 oviposition or egg-laying events that took place. Because the second oviposition, and the maggots associated with that, which were all second instar Chrysomya and considerably smaller, would have required 1,014 accumulated degree hours prior to the collection. Okay, and this would have indicated an onset of the second oviposition occurring at approximately 6 in the morning on the 12th of February, 2014. So these are the minimum estimates for these insects.
And when you say minimum estimates, what do you mean by that?
Okay. This is when the first group is going to reach that stage of development. There may be some that take longer. When we make our collections, we have no way really of knowing if we're at the head of the pack or the back of the pack. Okay. So we use the minimum.
And I want to get back to what you just mentioned. You testified that there were 2 oviposition or fly egg-laying events that you could see based on your analysis. Is
Yes.
that correct?
Right.
And the first one, pursuant to your analysis, occurred on February 10th, 2014, at a minimum of 1 o'clock. When you say 1 o'clock, is that PM or AM?
PM.
Okay, so 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
And then you said there's another egg-laying event at around 7 p.m. that evening on February 10th?
These would probably be in the same oviposition event. When I think of an oviposition event, it means they're laying eggs
Oh, okay.
during that period of time.
Okay,
Because
so,
they do have intermediate sizes in here. And this indicates a more or less continuous oviposition as opposed to something happened here and then nothing happens and something happens again.
okay, so I understand it now. So from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., there's flies laying eggs.
Yes.
On the source. Is that fair
That's
to say?
correct.
And then,
I would just object that is to time on the date, but that's okay.
All right,
I'm sorry,
you mentioned the time, but not the date. Okay.
on February 10th, 2014.
Yes, that was the date.
And then you said there's a second oviposition or fly laying egg event. The next one is not until February 12th of 2014, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the minimum time there would have been 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes.
So between February 10th at 7 p.m. to February 12th at 6 a.m., is there any evidence that according to your analysis, that you see of any egg-laying activity or oviposition?
No, if oviposition had been occurring during this period of time, in between the two events, I would have maggots present at intermediate sizes. Okay, but the fact that I had simply the two more or less distinct groups size-wise, this indicates that oviposition occurred, then for some reason it did not occur, and then occurred again.
Now, with respect to the first oviposition that you testified began a minimum time beginning on February 10th, 2014 at approximately 1 p.m., would that be consistent, Dr. Goff? Let's say a person is killed on February 9th, the evening of February 9th, between the hours of 9 to 11 p.m., roughly. Person is killed. Would that be consistent with the oviposition beginning the next day on February 10th, 2014, according to the estimated times that you've given?
Okay, typically the blowflies are not going to be that active at night. They cannot fly well at night, as you can see just looking if you're sitting at home. If the lights are off, the flies are not flying around. Mosquitoes, yes, but flies, no. They don't see well at night. So in hours of darkness, they tend to make themselves comfortable, if you will, and they just stay in one location. So they're not out actively seeking. When light comes up, they become active, and then they'll go out and again begin looking for some place to lay their eggs.
And so, Dr. Goff, would that be consistent then with an oviposition beginning the following day at the times that you noted?
It would be consistent with that.
And when you say flies start looking or begin looking for food, can you tell us what attracts a fly to a certain food source?
Okay. We're going to have, first there are visual clues. The fly can see that something looks like food, it will go there. You have odors that are going to be coming out. So predominantly odor and visual clues are going to be the two primary attractants.
So a fly can smell a body that's beginning decomposition?
Yes.
And then after 7 p.m. on February 10th, you said there's no activity that you can tell based on the maggots that you've inspected and observed. Is that correct?
Yes. At that point, I have no way of indicating any insect activity there. Now,
the lack of insect activity during the time periods we just talked about, February 10th through February 12th, and more specifically February 10th from 7 p.m. through February 12th to 6 a.m. Would that be consistent with wrapping a body, a dead body, in a blanket and taping the ends of the blanket with masking tape to stop any type of activity or prevent activity during a certain time period?
That would be a possibility.
And can you explain why that is a possibility?
If, in fact, the flies cannot get to the body, they are not going to oviposit. They may be attracted to the body, but they cannot penetrate the wrappings and lay their eggs. Eggs that may be laid on the outside, two things can happen. One is, actually three things. First, the eggs may simply dry up. Fly eggs are very vulnerable to drying, desiccation. Second thing that may happen is you have a number of predators that will also be attracted to a decaying body, such as the Philanthus species. that I mentioned earlier. This is going to feed on fly eggs, it's going to feed on maggots.
Is that the beetle?
That's the beetle, yes. Sorry, I forget. The third thing that can happen basically is that the eggs will hatch and the larvae will be on the external surface. They may actually remain on the external surface. If there is a lot of byproduct of decomposition that's present, if there's a lot of blood that is present, they may be able to continue their development to an extent.
Now, Dr. Goff, have you been involved or participated in any case where a dead body was wrapped and that, I guess, delayed or prevented oviposition or flies laying the eggs from occurring?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell us about that?
Now, I have actually two cases that come to mind. One was on the island of Oahu. We had a woman who had been missing for about 13 days. I made my estimate based on the insects that were present, found I could account for about 10.5 days of insect activity on that particular body. This left us with a 2.5 day gap, which became a matter of some contention among the attorneys. Okay, trying to think of a polite way to phrase it. Basically what happened was I got tired of it, so I got a dead pig. A 50-pound pig is what we use as an animal model for human decomposition. I duplicated the wrappings and I put the pig in my backyard. And then I kept track of how long it took for the flies to penetrate the wrapping and lay their eggs. And it took 2.5 days before they were able to actually work their way down through the wrappings and lay their eggs. So the 10.5 plus the 2.5 gave us a 13-day period which she had been missing. The second case that comes to mind is in the state of Washington. And here a young child was killed. And her body was simply left out in a wooded area with a tarp laid over the top. The edges of the tarp were not weighted down. But in that case, even though there was access to the body, it took approximately 2 days before the flies went through and laid their eggs on the body. So one case, very well wrapped. The other case, actually a somewhat minimal covering in terms of access.
And getting back to the first case, when you said very well wrapped, do you recall in that case how that body was wrapped?
Yes, in that particular case, there were 2 layers of blankets. Okay, the first layer wrapped around, ends tucked up, and then a second layer of blankets was installed, take the ends up, and then they took an ace bandage and tied it at both ends. So it was very nicely sealed in 2 layers of blankets.
And you said in the second case the tarp was not, I guess, weighted down to the ground.
No.
But that still caused a 2-day, did you say a 2-day?
Still had a 2-day delay.
Delay. Now, Dr. Goff, were you able to, you mentioned that one of the containers that had the maggots in them, the maggots were taken from, according to the label, from a green blanket, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you also mentioned there's another container that was labeled, and it was labeled soil indentation, is that
Yes.
correct?
That's correct.
Now, was there a difference in when you made an identification of the maggots in those respective containers?
Yes, there's a difference in the stage of development.
Yeah, can you tell us about that, please?
Okay. In the taken from simply the blankets, a green blanket, we had Chrysomya megacephala, and these were 3rd instars. I also had 1st and 2nd instar maggots present. and I had Chrysomia rufifosseis, and I had second instar maggots present.
Okay, so this is for the green blanket.
This is for the green blanket.
And then when you say third instar and second instar, those are the more advanced stages of the development.
You go through the egg, the first instar, second instar, third instar. Third instar is the most advanced of the three.
And you said you found maggots that were in the third stage, or the third instar
Correct.
for development on the green blanket.
That's correct.
And what does that tell you right there when they're in that stage?
Okay, this was basically in our first oviposition event.
So the maggots that you identified on the blanket as part of the third stage or third instar would have developed during the first oviposition, which was on February 10th, with a minimum time of 1 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you note when you inspected the maggots that were taken from the container labeled soil indentation?
Okay, here I had both Chrysomia megacephala and Chrysomia rufifosseis, but in both cases I had only second instar maggots. No third instars were present.
And did you know that because of their size?
Size and the structure of the posterior spiracles.
Okay. Does that mean their features?
Yes, the primary breathing structures, the posterior end of the body. There you had only two slits in each spiracle.
And what did that tell you?
Well, that told me that these basically were younger than the maggots that were present, or the third instar maggots that were present on the blanket.
And would that be consistent with the maggots from the soil indentation, I guess, beginning their oviposition later on February 12th of 2014?
That would be consistent with the female flies laying their eggs on the 12th.
Now, would that be consistent, or let me ask you this. With the female flies laying their eggs during the second oviposition, which is on February 12th, would that be consistent with the body being, I guess, exposed or even removed from the blanket and left in a certain area?
That would be consistent with it, but I could not, based on strictly entomological evidence, indicate that that would be what happened.
Right, could the, at that point, is it possible, based on your training, experience, and education, is it possible that the female fly could have laid eggs, I guess, while a body was still in the blanket on February 12th, 2014?
Objection, it seems that's not evidence.
No, this is a hypothetical.
The objection is overruled.
Can you answer that question?
As a hypothetical, yes.
And Dr. Goff, there was, with respect to the maggots that were recovered from the soil indentation, if there's a large concentration of maggots in one area, and I'm going to refer to the soil indentation, much more so than any other area within a small area where those maggots were recovered. Does that indicate anything to you based on your training, education, and experience?
Well, basically, that's going to indicate that there was a food resource there that was sufficient to support the group of maggots. When the food resource disappears, maggots essentially are either going to look around a little bit or they're going to die. But typically, if you have a large concentration, that means that there was a sufficient food resource there to support that group of maggots for a period of time.
And when you say sufficient food resource, would that entail a human body?
That could, yes.
And can you tell us when maggots are feeding on a food source such as a human body, are you able to tell us what are they feeding on specifically?
Okay, maggots, you take a look at the mouth parts, they are set up for soft tissue. Okay, they have, instead of opposable mandibles or teeth as we would have it, they have what we refer to as mouth hooks. And my illustration basically be my fingers like this, and what they're going to do is they're going to gouge and liquefy this material. They're going to produce salivary enzymes, going to more or less pre-digest and then suck up the semi-liquefied food. Okay. For that reason, they prefer mucous membranes, they prefer soft tissue, they do not do well on bone, on tendon, they do not like to go after hair, thing like this. This is really something that they are not set up to feed on.
And how about fingernails?
Fingernails, no.
Cartilage?
Cartilage, not generally. They may on occasion, but if the cartilage is broken down by some bacterial action.
You know, I think this would be a good time to break for lunch,
All right.
not because of the topic, but.
All right, we will take our lunch recess and reconvene. Thank you.